Hi, welcome back. We are going to be talking now a little bit about why is it that popularity is so important. How come this is something that is affecting us so much when we are young? And how come it's something we seem to kind of gravitate towards for the rest of our lives? Well, let's talking about that a little bit. One thing I'm going to point out this is idea that this has become really explicit. Have you ever noticed recently if you're on a web, there's a lot of information about what's trending, whether you are on Twitter or whether you are just even looking at a news story on anything you see. You'll sometimes see the graphic that talk about how many times has a story been tweeted, or how many people have liked it on Facebook, or how many comments are there, and often that's right at the top of the story. In fact, even you're done reading the story, there's maybe those icons again, encouraging you like, you should tweet about it, you should like it on Facebook. Why is that happening? We've kind of almost grown accustomed to it. I think one of the reasons why it's happening is because it's based on this fundamental premise that if we see a lot of people are really interested in something, we'll think something is good, it's important. We want to do everyone else is going. Even if we resist that idea and we think, no, I'm individual, I don't just conform. Still, we're kind of bit influenced by that. We think, well, if that's something that 3,000 other people have liked, then it must be something really important that I need to look at. It's the same thing when you watch a commercial and they say this is number one movie at the box office. They are really trying to pull on the idea that it's popular and therefore that means it's good. But why does that work so well? Why do we even care about the fact that everyone else is doing it? I mean, I want to read the new stories that I think are of interest to me. And I don't think my interests are going to be the same as 10,000 other people that read the same news story. So why would I automatically think that that's important? It turns out that a lot of this might have to do with the way that we developed as a species. And the way that we can think about that is we took a step way back and thought about this from an evolutionary perspective. So let's go back to the world of cavemen and cavewomen and really thought about what life was like at that time because that's how we developed the brain we have today. Even thought that's a long time ago. That's not very long ago from the perspective of biological development. So there are lots of ways that what happened back then it's still influencing us today and it's still influencing how our brain work. So have you ever noticed how if you yawn that other people around will yawn? Or have you ever heard that when women live together in close quarters or spend a lot of time together, their menstrual cycles will start to synchronize? That all has to do with the same idea here. It's the sense that when we were cave people a long time ago, we quickly learned that we going to do a lot better if we live together and if we kind of pay attention to signals from each other. So if you think about it, if you went on your own, well, you would have a hard time getting food, right? If you got food and you killed something like a giant wild beast or whatever, you're not going to be able to eat all of that all by yourself. So it's really inefficient, and if you try to save the rest of it, it's going to spoil and you are going to get sick and die, and evolutionally you're going to be weeded out. So we really learned that when it comes to food, same with safety, protecting one another, or when it comes to other way of coordinating activities like when we should all go to sleep. That way we can all go to the next part of we're nomadic group so that help us to the next part of the we're trying to move to. It will be good if that was all synchronized. And we were in a herd and we learned to be a herd. And the more you're staying in a herd, the more you sleep when everyone sleeps. That way we can all work together and move together at the same time. The more that everyone stops to give a birth or conceive new babies, that should all happen at the same time. We should all eat together, we should all protect each other. If you are living that hard that those things will be threatened. You won't get food, you won't be safe, you won't stop at the same time as other, and you might get kicked out. You might be alone, you might be unsafe, and that's not good for you. The people that did it, they we weeded out through natural selection. We are all the people that survive us by learning to pay attention to what we heard has to say. Turns out that has had a really cool indelible effect on how our brains are put together. But we just recently discovered this on ways that we kind of didn't even expect. So there have been a lot of researchers that have been interested in understanding how the brain works. And in particular, there have been a lot of people that have looked at how the brain kind of lights up in an fMRI, let's say, when we experience pain. So, what I mean by that is there have been a lot of studies where they have asked people lay down in fMRIs. They're kind of laying there and they show them a screen over their head. And they give them an opportunity to experience some types of stimuli. So while their hand is sticking out of fMRI, they might get a little prick or some sort of painful stimulus. When it happens, the fMRI will allow them to see what areas of the brain are kind of line up. That there are particular areas that tell us that we experience in pain, and the areas tell us it's time to start regulating this pain and doing something about it. Now the parts of our brain that signal pain, it's really important because the pain is our ways off. It's the brain way of telling us something very serious is happening. You need to do something about it. So pain is kind of most powerful signal that our brain can give us. Tell us that if we don't go something soon, we may die or our species may be in trouble. An interesting thing happens. So there were some researchers, including Naomi Eisenberg from UCLA, who decided to do some studies looking at the people in fMRI machine in the magnet. And they asked them to, instead of getting real pain, they asked them to precipitate some interaction where they were getting excluded by others. The way that it worked was something there were real people that folks were communicating with while they were in the magnet, and sometimes they were just pretend. But either way, the experiment put it together so the person in the fMRI's magnet thought that they were being excluded, and the others were choosing not to interact with them. So in a way, it was kind of like they were getting a signal saying you are getting kicked out of the herd. You are not part of the group anymore. You are getting excluded. Turns out they were very surprised to find that when people got a signal to say that they were getting excluded, the parts of their brain that lit up were the part of the brain that light up when we experience real physical pain. And this kind of led of the idea that there might be something called social pain. We experience social exclusion in the exact same way that we experience physical pain. In fact, there's even a research to say that if you take a Tylenol, then that helps your social pain go down. So maybe this is why even the way we say it in English, our language tends to mirror the idea of pain. Talk about heartbreak or homesickness. It's the idea that it's experience physical symptoms for a social rejection experience. So it kind of suggests and there some way that the lack of popularity makes us experience pain. And our brain is telling us with its powerful signal, you need to do something about this. Don't get kicked out of the herd. Make sure that you are safe. Turns out that there's some other research also that has to do with our DNA that found that this even more powerful than we even realized. But before we talk about that, I just have to tell you briefly about something that's really new. It's the idea of epigenetics. Epigenetics is really sense that while we all have our DNA and every single cell in our bodies has DNA in its nucleus, that DNA not very gene is turned on. Some gene turn on later or some gene never turn on. But what we recently learned in epigenetics is that sometimes what makes those cells turn on certain DNA is something that happens in our environment. So, believe it or not, something could walk in the room, they could say hello to you, or they could say something not pleasant to you, they kind of reject you. And that will actually affect that happens in your own cells. And the reason why is important is because, as you probably know, many of our cells are dying every second, and new cells are growing every second. So, if an experience happened to you now, the cells that will start growing 2 seconds from now. In fact, it's been checked that every 6 months or so we are a person that is reactive to what happens to us and those prior cells about 6 months ago. So we are constantly new, renewed people that are living through epigenetics based on what happens to us months before. It turns out our social experience have an incredibly important impact of this DNA. We have learned that if something happens to us that makes us feel rejected, then our bodies turn off specific. And the DNA they turn on has to do with our physical health. So again, let's think again about cave people. If you were a person that living back in those time, one of the things that happens when you lived with others is found that you got a lot of colds. And the reason why, because viruses spread from human to human. So as long as you're interacting with other people, your DNA is activating to develop immunity to viruses. And all of genes that helps us resist viruses are upregulating. In other words, they are kind of turned on. If you were part of the herd, there was much less of a chance that a dinosaur has going to come and eat your arm off. You would need that kind of pro-inflammatory protection as much. Well, what happens in the minute we get rejected by others? We actually find the genes that help us resist viruses become down regulated. But if you experience chronic rejection over so much time, you experience way of feeling that you are not part of the herd. You're not someone that is accepted and popular, then over time your cells will continually develop is upregulated inflammatory response. So it turns out that popularity is actually changing the way that our DNA expresses. This has major implications for health. We'll talk about more of that later. So in summary, it's important to remember that one of the reasons why we seems to care so much about popularity is that our species thought about being in the herd as someone we needed for safety. And the minute that we lose popularity, our body is preparing us that will happen, then we're kicked out of the herd. And our brain is telling us with its more powerful signal, you are needing to do something to fix this. Go back to others, do what you can, you be a part of the group. And that's really important. Your DNA is changing. But it's not necessarily helpful in today's society. And that's some of the reason why popularity plays such a huge role today.